Larry Lala here with a video case brief. Hawkins versus McGee, the case of the hairy hand. Let me give you a quick overview of what I'm going to do here. I'm going to start with the rule itself, which is the important part of the case. You're going to walk away from Hawkins versus McGee despite whatever you talk about in class with a one-line rule, and you need to know that first, especially if you're reading this at the last minute. We're then going to go over a plainer language definition. I'm going to try to break the rule down so that it's a little simpler and it doesn't sound so jargony. I'm then going to tell you how you can use the case in a future fact pattern issue spotting exam. This is what you really need the case for. But we're also going to go over a quick factual and procedural background so you can either read the case easier or survive in class. Now, the rule. An award of expectation damages, this is what you're supposed to get out of Hawkins versus McGee. An award of expectation damages, that is a benefit of the bargain theory of damages, is the difference between the value of what was promised under the contract and the value of what the promisee in fact actually received, which also includes incidental damages if, this is the big thing, if they stem from the breach of contract. In sort of plainer language, this means that if you're the promisee and you win on a breach of contract case and you get benefit of the bargain damages, that means that you get the value of the promise minus what you're stuck with now after the promisor tried to deliver on the contract but didn't, plus incidental losses that occurred because of the breach itself, but only if those incidental losses occurred because of the breach. How do you use this case? There are two things you would use Hawkins versus McGee for. First, you can cite it generally when you decide that expectation damages are appropriate here. This does not mean expectation damages is always the right measure of damages for a breach of contract. There are other theories of relief. But I think the more important use of Hawkins versus McGee is where a court is awarding too much in calculating benefit of the bargain damages. That is, they're not only awarding the difference between the value of the contract and the value of what the promisee has, but for instance, there are things that a person would have paid for or suffered even if the contract had been performed 100% correctly. So this is really the heart of Hawkins versus McGee. What is and is not part of an expectation damages calculation? Now we get to the bad stick figures. So here are the things that you need to know to survive in class. Here are the parties. The plaintiff, doesn't matter his name, was an 11-year-old boy who was trying to turn on a light switch. And when he tried to turn on that light switch, he got zapped. So he ends up with this kind of ugly scar. Let's make it very Harry Potter shaped. There's a lot of scar tissue on his hand. His father goes to a doctor. And the doctor, I'm guessing he's a quack, promises to do a skin graft. He's going to take hair from here and put it here. And the boy's going to get 100% good hand. That's what the doctor promised, is 100% good hand. So this is a better illustration. We have the hand with a scar. We do a skin graft with some blood oozing. By the way, what kind of a boy has chest hair? We're going to cut some skin from the chest, take this patch, and we're going to end up with a hand that's as good as new. Of course, this is not what happened. What actually happened was we have the scarred hand. The doctor does the skin graft, removes the skin, which causes pain and suffering. There happens to be hair on that piece of skin. The skin gets transferred to the hand, and instead of 100% good hand, we have a really bad hand with lots of hair on it. So here's the procedural posture of the case. Hawkins sues McGee on a theory of warranty, but basically breach of contract. And Hawkins wins expectation damages, which the jury calculates this way. The value of the 100% good hand per the contract minus the value of the current not very good hairy hand, and this is calculated to be $500, plus pain and suffering from the surgery, which adds substantially to the total damages that McGee has to pay. McGee doesn't like this and asks the trial court, after the jury verdict, as a matter of law, to set aside the part of the award for pain and suffering. McGee argued that that was not part of a correct expectation damages calculation. The trial court agrees and sets aside that part of the award. Hawkins doesn't agree, and the case goes up to the New Hampshire Supreme Court. So again, this is what the trial court verdict kind of looked like. The jury verdict is that expectation damages should be calculated by starting with the value of the 100% good hand, subtracting the value of the current hairy hand, and adding in, as part of this calculation, the value of Hawkins's pain and suffering. After the verdict, the trial court made a different decision. It took the value of the good hand minus the value of the hand that Hawkins actually had, and as to pain and suffering, the judge, as a matter of law, said, no, this does not go in. So the parties take it to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and what did they say? Here, it basically is a restatement of expectation damages, the difference between the value of a perfect hand and the value of the hand in its present hairy, crappy condition. Here's the key part, including any incidental consequences fairly within the contemplation of the parties when they made the contract. But this part is even more key. This is outside of the holding, which you can kind of tell as we therefore conclude. The pain and suffering should not be part of the expectation damages calculation, basically because it would have happened even if Hawkins had ended up with a perfect hand. The extent of the plaintiff's suffering does not measure this difference in value. The pain necessarily incident to a serious surgical operation was part of the contribution which the plaintiff was willing to make to his joint undertaking with the defendant to produce a good hand. What they're saying is, just as the trial court ruled that the damages calculation should have been the 100% good hand minus the state of the hairy hand, but excluding pain and suffering, which would have taken place even if Hawkins had ended up with the 100% good hand. And let's go back and look at the promise. The promise involved a skin graft. This pain and suffering was going to happen no matter what to achieve the good hand. That is the key to Hawkins versus McGee. Now, one last thing I want to leave you with, and this is kind of disgusting. Here's a hypothetical. What are other valid sources of incidental damages if we don't include pain and suffering from the skin graft? What is the stupid old thing that people say about people with hairy hands? Let me know what you think in the comments.